much of the time. And it's kind of interesting how she does it. And that's actually very much by design in the way apparently people thought about it, because they wanted to make this a joyous experience. The competitor, one of them, Google Personal Assistant, has gone back and forth, as I understand it, with lots of different approaches. The latest one, or one of the latest ones, is to try and make Personal Assistant respond in an extremely realistic way. Okay, so in fact, so much so that people tell me if you do the equivalent of a Turing test, you can't tell that you're actually conversing with an algorithm as opposed to a person. And there's hums and hems and stutters and hesitations. It really mimics natural language. That seems great, except once people find out, apparently a lot of people, when they find out, they're very upset about it. They're resentful because they feel like they've been deceived because they thought they were talking to a person. So that difference, between joy versus realism is kind of a theme that animates a set of studies we did. And the interface with organizational culture is important because these things have to be embraced within the company as well as with your customers. But the question is, how do you evaluate it? And my big theme of research these days is about authenticity and perceived authenticity, and that's the kind of standard that we use here. Now, I could talk till I'm blue in my face about authenticity, and I'm sure everybody in this room has some perception of it or some definition. We heard some talks earlier this morning where authenticity was actually on the slides. We're not actually I'm not going to impose an analytical definition. I'm not going to tell you, or in these studies tell people what authenticity is. We know from research that there's at least two major ways people interpret the meaning behind when they make an attribution of authenticity. One is when they say something like, I'm going to go to an authentic Sichuan restaurant. What they mean is that restaurant fits at least their prescribed notions about what a Sichuan Chinese restaurant should look like, and they may use all kinds of features and invoke them and decide it fits the institutionalized classification that sits in their mind. The other way, which is actually quite different but not contradictory necessarily, is exemplified when you talk about somebody being an authentic person. Okay, an authentic person, you're not going to say matching some classification as you're reading into it something about their sincerity and their moral decisions that they've made, and the fact that they made them rather than use decisions somebody else made. And so, so what we're going to do is, evaluate people's perceptions or experiences with algorithms and ask them how authentic they thought they were in lots of different ways. The basic research question is, what's the best way to develop an interface that's regarded as authentic? Or, as we like to think about it in much more academic terms, which is the better role model, Frankenstein or the Terminator? Okay, that sounds crazy, and I know you're kind of wondering, like, now where's he going here? This is the end of the day. I thought this wasn't going to be too complicated. It's still not complicated. Okay, so those of you who remember Frankenstein, it's actually the monster depicted here is not named Frankenstein. Frankenstein is the name of the creator. It's Dr. Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein. And so the theme here is about emphasizing the human origins behind an algorithm to make that algorithm seem more authentic. And I'll talk about ways to do that, but that's one way you might do it, and one way some designers and some companies approach it. And in the research in authenticity, for instance, when people evaluate artists and writers and singers, they often go back and search in the biography of the person to find the kind of meaning that work's supposed to represent, and they're kind of emphasizing the human origins of it. The other approach, which some people think is by far and away the most natural, and I should say this is kind of maybe, well, I don't know if this is the Siri one or not, but this is definitely the current Google Personal Assistant approach, which is to try to make it as human-like, as lifelike as possible. That is to try to anthropomorphize the algorithm so that it actually comes across as a person. And if you think about Siri does not do that at all. When you talk to Siri, you know that you're not talking to a human, because the voice has a kind of robotic quality to it, and there's no deception at all. With Google Assistant, you might. So, so the big question is, what's better? And the Terminator and Frankenstein are just kind of up there to make this a little more vivid, but it's really about which way is better, which way is more effective in generating authenticity, human origins or an anthropomorphization. And I'm not going to go through these in detail. We've conducted a series of 5 studies. I'll give you one slide on each study and show you the main conclusions, which are pretty consistent, which is, in my mind, remarkable for any kind of empirical work. All of these are online studies. I'd say the last 4 I'd call experiments in that there is a manipulation, and the first one is just kind of a survey of sorts. Okay, so what do? So in the first one, we generated a list of 20 different descriptions of what an algorithm might do, and when participants log on and they're asked to look at this, so they get this description, and the name in each case is Cyril, C-Y-R-I-L-L. And we tell them that Cyril is an artificially intelligent algorithm, and then we tell them something about the work that Cyril does. And they're written in a way that they're not supposed to be evaluative or normative, but just descriptions. And we use 20 different domains that are actually real domains that algorithms operate in. So I give you 2 examples of this. Cyril designs graphic art, usually things like logos for various companies. Cyril recently designed a complete set of graphics for a new advertising campaign. That would be what a respondent would see, and then they would be asked, how authentic, it's nothing more, it's minimalistic. How authentic do you consider Cyril's work in this situation? Does Cyril have human connections? There's a series of questions to determine that. And, is Cyril lifelike? Does he have meaning, and things like this to get the anthropomorphization? And then we ask them, would you employ Cyril for a task that you might have? Another example is, Cyril makes hiring recommendations to employers. Recently, Cyril was asked to recommend candidates for sales managers' positions from a larger set of applicants. Okay, so about 300 people took this survey, and there's no causality, it's just a correlation. This is the first thing we did. And we find that there is, in fact, a very positive correlation with both approaches, with both the human origin, which is called connection here, and with the anthropomorphized version. That is, when they perceive Cyril as authentic, they also perceive them as having human origins and having an anthropomorphized character. They also said they would be willing to employ Cyril. So that told us that, at least there